So welcome everybody, and welcome to Complexity and Compassion, Bringing Life to Learning. My name is Harry Marshall. I am based in Singapore. I'm currently in Bangkok, and together with Sally, we are Holos Change Agents. We represent the Holos Asia Pacific faculty in Asia Pacific through our practice Dramatic Difference. And we're going to be taking you through the next slightly less than an hour journey around theatre-led learning and how you may be able to apply elements of theatre-led learning into a corporate learning or a learning environment, leadership development environment. We've got some really exciting and unique interactions for you today. But before we go into that, I'll pass over to Sally. And yes, when Sally met Harry, you can say it.
Thank you, Harry. So yes, we have been doing this for some 20 years now. And what we want to do with you a little bit today is bring to you our most recent work, which is some work with monologues. It's part of a series we call the Diversity Dialogues. I'll let Harry take you through a very quick agenda for today, but please, if you can come in from Swapcard, we are going to put you into a breakout during the session. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love questions as we go. So please do join us on Zoom if you can.
Absolutely. So just moving on, just very quickly, just a little bit about us. I've mentioned our practice, Dramatic Difference, for leadership coaching, team development practice working across the Asia Pacific region, founded by Sally in 2006. I think that's right, Sally, and 2016 or thereabouts in Singapore. We work with clients across the Asia Pacific region predominantly, sometimes beyond, Middle East, etc. And we partner with Holos very closely in delivery of solutions into the Asia Pacific region. And what brings us together today is theatre-led learning. And we're going to be defining that for you today. We're going to be showing it to you. Sally's going to be sharing a little bit more about what theatre-led learning is, and particularly in the context of our latest and most prized project that we're very proud of, the Diversity Dialogues. And just by way of a little agenda, we're going to be showing you two monologues which are going to be acted by two of our fantastic corporate role play actors who are in the room with us now, Ben and Nina. So if you, Ben and Nina, give us a wave, and everyone gives Ben and Nina a wave. You'll be singing from them a little later on. We're going to be sharing with you some tips and tricks and techniques. You're going to have an opportunity to have a chat with each other and reflect on the experience today. And we're going to close out with some Q&A at the end. The hour will move very quickly, far too quickly, I'm sure. So with that, I will hand you back to Sally to talk a little bit more about the Diversity Dialogues project.
Thank you, Harry. If we can go to the next slide, please. So working as coaches, as I know some of you in the audience also do, we're privy to some very intimate conversations with people, incredibly high-functioning senior executives who share the intersection of their life and their work with us. And the Diversity Dialogues have their roots in those conversations. So I became aware of how much many of my coaching clients were dealing with. And having seen theatre pieces like the Vagina Monologues, and working as we do with this incredible regional group of professional actors, corporate role players, I could just see an actor on a bar stool under a spotlight telling a story of life and work, and could see how powerful it would be. And so we decided to build this. We managed to get a commission from a law firm we were working with, along with their women's group and their allies network, and they wanted to do something different. So we took all the money from that project and we plowed it into writers, actors, etc. And what we did was interview a minimum of 3 senior working professionals who shared an element of for want of a better word, a diversity issue or facet. And then using only their words, their real words from those interviews, we wove those together into a combined script, partly to help preserve individuals' privacy and conceal their identity, but also for the richness of that language. So when you hear these two monologues, you will be hearing the lived experience of working professionals. The topics you see here, from mental illness to LGBTQ, chronic illness, transgender, these are the topics that we've created so far. We are currently working on disabilities, of physical disability, very, very wide topic. So tricky to find the right way in. Social and financial privilege is one we want to tackle, and then something about this journey of women at work from menstruation, maternity, menopause, which is very timely and being discussed a lot. We've applied this obviously in work specifically around DEI, so bias, microaggression, micro-inequity, allyship, active bystander. We've used it in special interest events, International Women's Day, Pink Dot. It's the week of neurodiversity at the moment. So a lot of corporates have employee resource groups that are, and they drive events around those specific sort of initiatives. So that's sort of the background to it. We are slowly but steadily trying to build also a video library. So our actors deliver these live in online workshops or in-person workshops or hybrid workshops. But slowly we're also building the library in video form as well. And I think that's probably the perfect cue to show you what these are like. So what I'd like to do is invite Ben, Neil, if you could spotlight Ben for us. And Ben is going to deliver a monologue on race. And it's called We Need to Talk. Over to you, Ben.
I'm looking through my eyes and I'm just looking ahead. I just see the world. I'm just thinking, what bills do I have to pay? Why is the dog behaving like that? How come it's raining again today? Or the conversation we're in. And then someone will share that they've got a Nigerian or Gambian or Cameroonian friend or whatever. And I become aware that I'm Black. And it's not being made aware that I'm Black that bothers me. It's the fact that it was at the forefront of the other person's mind all this time. My skin color? After everything I've said, all the topics we've been engaging around, I moved my whole family to this country for a better educational environment and more political safety. I tell my friends very bluntly that we did not move for downward social mobility if I could help it. But we don't succeed if we focus on the obstacles at the expense of the possible solutions. But people shouldn't think that just because I've done it, every single Black person or migrant should be able to just pull themselves up by the bootstraps. I had certain advantages. A very academic background. My dad went to uni at age 37. He's a barrister now. So we had that kind of drive, that kind of resilience. When I was at university doing my PhD, I wandered in one morning. I was just wearing my jeans and had my rucksack, carrying my books, and this lady comes towards me saying, "You're late." I turned around to see who she was talking to. And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were the cleaner." Because till I turned round, she hadn't seen the books. On the first day I started work, I turned up at the gate. The guard said to me, "Who are you? Are you working in the office?" And I said, "No, I'm a scientist." Silence. And when I got to the lab, this lady says to me, "Are you the new clerk?" No, chemist. I started subconsciously utilizing symbols of class and status to insulate myself from racism. Wearing tasseled loafers, a good jacket, sounding a certain way. Enunciation and pronunciation, doing all things the proper way. If I could stack my accent, my way of speaking, the variables I couldn't control would affect me less. But you pay a psychological price. The allostatic load. It affects your personal relationships and your health. But I kept persevering. And then I came to work here. In fact, it was the most racist place I've ever experienced. I've visited before to attend a training program and once for a conference. But you're pretty well insulated. You don't experience the day-to-day. Once I held the door for someone as goods were coming into my apartment building and they were scared to walk through. At the local market, I approached a stall to ask a question. This woman started screaming and basically flapping her arms and waving me off. It reminded me of a childhood incident, playing Ring of Roses in the playground. This girl wouldn't hold my hand because she thought I was dirty. I always remember that. And traveling for work, I used to get stopped by customs all the time. My white colleagues, not once, never. It was cruel how indulged they were and how little they realized it. Until finally one trip I said, "You know, the color of my skin doesn't make me a criminal." The woman who was searching my bag got so embarrassed. And the guy who actually stopped me suddenly randomly pulled over this pair of white guys and looked pointedly in my direction. I felt bad because those two guys would never have been stopped if I hadn't been making a huge fuss. Leaders matter. Leaders can give everyone with talent an opportunity, no matter what age or race or what language they speak. Leaders who take the time to understand every person instead of biased perception, creating a positive. I've been lucky to have a lot of great bosses. One in particular who saw me and my skills and my capabilities, not where I came from or what I look like. And I progressed very quickly. And then under another senior exec, I felt like an ass, as if I was of value, but not valued. So yeah, if you see something, say it, because you never know if someone is feeling low and wondering if they're making any difference. Let's have openness and dialogue. I mean, let's not ignore the differences, because those differences are what make us who we are. I hate it when people say, "I don't see color." Yes, you do. We all do. But sometimes people get too offended because someone will say something in a clumsy way. We can all say something offensive. Listen to the intent behind it and follow through with that. All people become afraid to speak, and we need to talk to each other.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much.
Give Ben a round of applause. Thank you, Ben, for that performance. So we'd just like to just put it out to you, really. Just thank you for the applause. Lovely. I forget they move now, which makes it even more dynamic, I guess. And please put in the chat or take yourself off mute or any other emojis that you want to post in your Zoom window. Just initial reactions. How did that land with you? What are you thinking? What surprised you, or what impressions did you get from this story? We'd love to get some voices in the room, as it were.
But just to let you know that the most consistent feedback that we've had from various client groups that we've used the diversity dialogues with is this word powerful. People find them incredibly moving at an individual emotional level. And as well as using them in online workshops like this, we've used them face-to-face a couple of times, but we also challenged ourselves. And when Hong Kong first began to open up for public gatherings, we invited an audience of about 50, 60 clients into a fringe theatre here in Hong Kong, and we staged 5 of these monologues actually as a theatre piece, very simply staged, actors on a stool, and it worked extremely well just as a piece of theatre. And I say just in the sense of without a specific sort of teaching or discussion element attached to it. And one of the things a client came back to us to ask was whether it was possible to then stage that, you know, at an offsite or in a client event. So our purpose here today is sort of exploring the different ways that theatre, what we call theatre-led learning, which would include this kind of storytelling, could be deployed into getting topics onto the agenda, getting people to not only think about things, but feel things quite viscerally. And the original law firm that commissioned this work, or that accepted our suggestion of doing the work this way, used it in a couple of different ways. One is around building ambassadors for allyship within the organization, but also taking certain topics to the management committee in terms of policy. So, for example, we have a monologue about non-traditional families that is often delivered by a male actor, and so what's taken out of that is a gay male couple and the offer of discretionary maternity leave for one of the fathers. And similarly with surrogacy, there was talk about, you know, what would best practice be? What would the leading edge of inclusion support be in an organization? So it can also have a sort of a policy application.
Welcome back. I think that's everyone back in the room. I'm just going to bounce around the screen just in the interest of time. We'd love to hear your sort of thoughts around those couple of questions. You can refer to them in the chat if the chat has disappeared for you since you're in the breakout room. I'll just put the questions there again. The project is relatively new, right? So we launched the diversity dialogue sort of about a year ago, maybe a bit less. So we're keen to hear from you, you know, in terms of how you might be able to see, you know, applications for the diversity dialogues and how you might be able to build out from these stories, you know, to help leaders become aware of and practice inclusion or work towards and building inclusive workplace culture. So anyone like to start us off? Steve.
Thank you, Harry. I'm going to get this over with as quickly as possible. While it's fresh in my mind, I was with Rachel and Dipti. And Dipti, by the way, means a small or little sparkle of light. How cool is that?
Oh, how beautiful is that?
Yeah. So we were enlightened, the three of us. It was a bit like two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for lunch in terms of who's going to speak. So I got the short straw. Thank you. It's really, I'm making light, but actually these are unbelievably important dialogues. My experience of running diversity and inclusion workshops, of which I've run many, relies entirely on the telling of stories. The minute that we go into theory, the shutters come down, the audience switches off, and we look forward to the next tea break. The power of storytelling, as was so beautifully done by Ben and Nina, is exceptional. And I think that when a story lands, it is the very next step to creating more psychological safety for the next time. Yep. That if we create a space for these dialogues that is itself in a psychological space or safe space, then the next time it creates even more of an openness, awareness, and even almost an excitement about what are we going to learn here. So powerful work. I haven't done my group justice. I could speak for ages as an ex-military white South African male, and still 33 years later going through the processes towards progress, never perfection.
Well, thank you for being on the path like the rest of us.
So I'm happy to jump in for our group. I was
Lovely.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rachel.
Rachel.
with Özge and Rob, and we thought it was incredibly powerful and would lead to very deep conversations in the room. The power of using people's own words we thought was quite significant, and also just listening while it was delivered. We did feel it was going to be important to think about the level of trust, existing trust, and degree of sharing within the group before bringing this in. So seasons and timing we felt were important, so that there was that psychological safety. We felt that people could be triggered quite easily if, you know, X and Y subject was part of their story. And we also felt that there ought to be perhaps some warning. It would be helped, the conversation would be helped, and we'd get the right people in the room at the right time. There's some warnings and people opt in. So for example, you know, there are warnings about flashing lights, aren't there, when it gives people migraines, something similar, and the opting in might be important. What we felt was important. And then a piece about free work. Where would the leaders within the group, or the most senior leaders within the group, need to be before this session was held, so they could deal with anything that came up? How do they get trained in this? You know, we thought that probably having a degree of knowledge about the others in the team was really important. You know, just everyday stuff. Otherwise, this would be a jump perhaps too far, but so powerful. And Özge made a brilliant point about cultural differences. You know, depend where the teams are based makes such a difference. So in the UK, we tend to shy away from these things, whereas the example was given in Turkey, people are less uncomfortable about dealing with deep issues, perhaps in the workplace. But so powerful, brilliantly presented, and I think a gift to people to help build empathy. And that was some of the feeling that came out of the group, empathy and self-knowledge, really.
I love that. And just not to sort of respond in any way or bash that back, but just to let you know that we don't necessarily use these as an avenue to disclosure. So the idea is not, you hear this person's story, now tell me yours. It's more about the person sitting next to you may have a story. And in Nina's example, that comes from a story from the General Counsel, the Asia Pacific General Counsel for a very large business. It involves the CFO, as you heard, 10 regional offices. These are high functioning, high performing executives. So for us, part of the more interesting conversation is reminding people that every person in your team or office has a story. If they haven't shared it with you, maybe it's too big, but how do you, you know, begin to find out enough? Or how do you, what I'm loving at the moment and we're working towards is around performance conversations, because I'm so interested in how we see the presenting issue, which is performance. And one of the interviewees in that story, for example, who talks about suddenly it became difficult. There was, you know, the start of a sort of derailing happening and nobody could explain it. And of course, it was addressed as a performance issue. So, you know, that's the arena that I find interesting, is in the what does this mean when there are humans who have things happening behind. Yeah.
Sorry, a couple of things that feel quite topical, just to kind of come back with that Penny and I were talking about. I mean, one was kind of recognizing that when we work with leadership teams, particularly over a period of time, what we're trying to do is encourage people to be open and disclosing. And we were just talking about the internal dilemma that could create for someone. whose story we've just heard about, and then if they do disclose a bit of it, how do people respond to it? In a way, and Penny talked about, you know, curiosity with good intent, and again, coming with my kind of British mindset, I like, how do you? We were just kind of talking about how it could be really helpful, almost, for people to be able to practice if somebody started to disclose. I mean, we heard the false, you know, a lot. But if they disclosed a little bit, how would you be curious with good intent when you're feeling perhaps potentially really uncomfortable and you don't know how to navigate this, and it's obviously been a big deal for somebody to start to disclose something, and it just felt so rich.
Yeah, and frankly, this kind of sits in a marriage with the other piece of our passion work, which is around dialogue. Mm. So we have a dialogue model. We are very much about, you know, trying to train people to have, as with so many people in our world, we were brought in for many years to do what we called a slice of bread. Can you do a negotiation skills, or can you do a difficult conversations, or can you do a performance feedback? And we have said over and over to clients now, we want to teach you how to make bread dough. We want to teach you dialogue skills, so that you can shape that into whatever kind of dialogue it is that you need to have. So without going into loads of detail, we've got a little document we'll share with you, but that's sort of where that intersect lives. This is the challenge, right? And the other piece that's come out recently from work with some leaders is how senior leaders often feel very honored. They feel very honored when their staff members disclose to them, right? And my challenge back to them has been, how often have you honored your staff members by disclosing your vulnerable story in return? So that's another piece that, you know, we're dancing a bit with. Tan, sorry, I can see your hand up.
So we were another group, Rachel Neiman, Richard Friend and me. And I just wanted to share something from our discussion. So most of the things have been said, but something that we said was, with regards to applying this, it would be important to stay with the emotion before jumping to action. That was a point that Rich made about how leaders want to just, I guess, jump to the action and solve the problem, but it's important to stay with the like raw emotion of it. And we thought it was clever that you used like more than one person's story and merged it together, because now these leaders are like, or these people are interacting with not just someone's direct story. And so they don't have to feel so, I mean, they can feel more open to give honest feedback and respond to it maybe more openly. That was something we said.
And I think for me, the additional piece is we can't say, oh, that's just because your story is like that, because it is multiple stories. So, you know, actually this is going on in the world. So of course, we could have this discussion for hours and would love to. Instead, I am going to do now a speed run through other theatre-led tools that you might want to think about. And we are completely open to, you know, be here as an advisory resource or anything that might be helpful. So forum theatre and hot seating. For us, this is where you have either multiple scenes or multiple actors in a scene. They're playing out that scenario, and the participants are audience. That is their job, to be audience, but they interact either through an actor who's called the anchor or through a separate facilitator, and we can press pause on the action, we freeze it, we take insight, suggestion, redirection from the audience, and the actors then replay, incorporating those audience suggestions. So it's a way of them learning by watching and directing rather than doing. And an interesting thing can be to either take an actor out of the scene and put them on a separate chair, and in role they're available to respond to questions. Why did you do it like that? How were you feeling? What was your motivation? You can even put different actors with different subgroups as they try and coach them to go back and have a better meeting, for example. And sometimes the seat gets even hotter in that we take an actor out of the scene and we put a participant in. It's a beautiful tool. If you've got the participant who says, you just need to, you should just be more, do more, say this. This is wonderful. And you pop them in and they realize how much harder these things are to do than to judge. And it can be a wonderful learning at many levels. Role play is what many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. So that it's talked about a lot. For us, this is like degrees of pretending. So role play is a scenario that's created based on real life, but everybody in it is pretending. We do use it, but less than you might think, because we much prefer what we call real play. So for us, that's where the participant has skin in the game. So we ask participants to pre-prepare their own scenario. The caveats are it should be real. It should be something that they need to do in the future, not something they've already done in the past. And we'll often give them a template or a format. Harry will share a document that has an example of that. And then the actor does a little interview with them to represent their counterpart X. Another great thing you can do, so when they're doing that, the participant delivers their performance feedback or whatever it is to the actor representing, and then you get them to swap chairs. So now the actor delivers what the participant just said, and the participant is their own recipient, and they get to feel what it feels like from the other chair. Again, can get some really beautiful learning out of that. And then the third thing that we use very often is what we call fishbowls and intervention coaching. We're often using this on skills teaching and skills practice. So we will have two actors or possibly two participants demonstrating a conflict conversation, for example. And we're teaching them skills by, in the moment, like Pinocchio sitting on their shoulder and saying, that sounds a bit like a statement. Can you frame that as an open question? How would you do that? So getting them to, in a very slow stop-start way, try and elevate their conversation into something more skilled. And one of the most interesting ways we've done that, so we worked with an intact leadership team, and we were talking about conflict resolution skills. So I challenged them in the moment, is there a conflict within this group? And I had already been primed. I knew there was one. I just wanted to see if they'd tell me. And eventually they fessed up that, yes, there was a bit of a conflict. And we created, if you're familiar with the work of John Gottman with a circle, and he uses 3 chairs. So we had conflict party A, conflict party B, and then we had the business as the empty chair. And we had them do that, and we would again coach them in the skills in the moment using our dialogue model in that case, but then also move them sometimes into the chair of, what does the business need? You as Fred need this, you as Sarah need that, but what does the business need? So you can use this kind of gestalt idea as well, and start with live skills that they're learning on a real issue that as a team they are dealing with. Just sinks that learning so much deeper, so much faster. And we have found, as long as you're facilitating it and really holding it, it builds trust and psychological safety really fast. Happy to take questions in any other form. Please do let us know. And if you want to try something, we're here to help.